my colleagues. We'll go to Supervisor Lawson-Remer first and then Vice Chair Vargas.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. You actually managed to capture much of what I wanted to convey, which is both that there's, I think, I appreciate so much the participation, and clearly this is an issue that matters to so many people because the pretty extensive public engagement. But there's both sort of, I would say, too much credit and too much blame. We don't deserve credit for having done anything, even if we, no matter what we do today, because all we're doing today is listening to the interim initial technical analysis of a report that I want to take a couple minutes to talk about. And we also haven't, as I said, we're at the beginning. So I do think it would be helpful to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about what this process is actually going to look like, because this is stage one of many stages in putting together a regional decarbonization framework and green jobs plan. So today we had the opportunity to hear the technical analysis from a global team that's been convened to look at what are the various options and pathways that we know using proven technology could get us to zero carbon in San Diego County. There's not a recommendation in there regarding what pathway to pursue. There's not a policy framework. There's not policy analysis. And most importantly, the green jobs analysis, which we know is coming in March, has not yet been begun. This is the technical analysis regarding what are the technical options that are feasible that we could pursue to decarbonize San Diego County. It's really vital analysis because it tells us things that we, frankly, I didn't know, and I would imagine my colleagues didn't know either, and most of us didn't know in terms of what are the cost-benefit trade-offs, what are the different pathways, what are the different options, and from my point of view, most interestingly, what are some of the things that we could do now that Dr. McCord called no regret options, which are things that we are very likely going to have to do no matter what big strategies we pursue, because they're things that make sense in the immediate term, no matter which direction and which pathway we choose, recognizing there's a lot of options. So I think that's very helpful information, especially sort of these beginning no regret options, as well as better understanding these trade-offs that we could pursue strategies that look at rooftop solar, or primarily we could pursue strategies that look at to generate the least cost energy, but at the cost of some of our ecosystems and biodiversity that make us grapple with real trade-offs, that there's not a magic bullet, there's not a perfect solution. Whatever we do, there's going to be costs and benefits and trade-offs. And I think that's very helpful. But what's coming next, I think, is equally important. And this is only, I would think of it as 1/3 of the analysis that's being done as part of this process in terms of putting forward a regional decarbonization and framework and green jobs plan. Next, I'm really excited coming in March, will be our initial interim report on the green jobs plan. Looking at this technical information regarding options around decarbonization and how do we do that in a way that, as my colleague mentioned, safeguards, protects, and in my hope, it's not just safeguards and protects, but deepens, increases, and strengthens those rungs on the pathway to middle-class prosperity in our county. That we will have a set of recommendations that say, okay, how do we do this so that we protect jobs, increase jobs, and particularly make sure that the jobs that are available, that we are growing and building, are good middle-class jobs that have benefits, that have pensions, that allow people to provide for their families and continue building prosperity in our community. And I don't mean that in the abstract. I think a lot of people talk about jobs in this abstract way, as if you could one day be a clerk and the next day you're a plumber. We all know this is not true. You cannot be a clerk and then a plumber. This is not how it works. You're a clerk, you're probably going to continue being a clerk, or you might do a job really similar that uses lots of the same skills. If you're a plumber, you're a plumber. You're going to probably do a job, continue doing that. If you're a pipe fitter, you're going to continue doing that. You might find a job very similar in a slightly different sector, but it is the same job. You're not going to suddenly become, a clerk. Right? For example, that's just not how it works. And so I think it's important to really speak that in a true way, that when I'm talking about jobs, I'm talking about real people who do real jobs, like someone's real job that we cannot let those jobs disappear. We cannot let those jobs evaporate. If those jobs have to be phased out, it'll be because someone retires, not because someone gets fired. And I think that's really important. So, and I say this because that's what I'm really looking forward to coming in March as a preliminary draft of, now that we have some technical analysis around what are some of the options around decarbonization, what are the folks who have done this planning, working on labor issues and have been good partners to the labor movement for the last 20, 30 years, what are their recommendations about how we take lessons learned and apply those here in San Diego County? And we will get that draft report back in March. I think it's my understanding, Sarah, is it's just going to be a draft, and the final one comes
August.
August. So I just wanted to outline this so that we all better understand what this timeline is, so that when we do have that draft in March, what I would love to do is make sure that a lot of the folks who've been part of this conversation today have an opportunity to get that well in advance of that meeting, have an opportunity to have structured input on that, and make sure that we take that draft report in March as a starting point and not as an ending point, because I think that's going to be really vital. Then, after we sort of have that analysis, then there's going to be a final report back that puts these two reports together, the decarbonization report and the green jobs report, into an overall holistic analysis coming back that's August, right? In August. Then once we get there, then we have the hard work led by our internal team, led by Murtasa, of how do we translate these recommendations and this analysis into actionable policies that we can all move forward. And some of those policies will be here at the county. Many of them will not be. Some of them will be at MTS, some will be at SANDAG, some will be at various boards we sit on. Some of them will be in different cities around our region. Some of them will be at the port. Only a small portion of those will be actionable policies that are actionable here at the county. So just sort of to recap, so we all can kind of think about this and how we engage in this in a really constructive way, is we will have in March a draft of the Green Jobs Plan. That's just a draft. It'll be a conversation. We'll probably I'm sure the report will get a lot of stuff right and a bunch of stuff wrong. There'll be a lot of opportunity for feedback. I hope my friends at LIUNA are partners in revising that report as it comes out, can give Carol and Bethany a lot of feedback on what you want to see changed. We'll have a final version of that coming back in August, and that's when we'll be looking at adopting something here at the board. Once we do that, then we'll be looking to Murtasa to say, okay, given that framework on both of these fronts, the technical pathways and the green jobs pathways, what are those components that we can actually implement here at the county in terms of policy? And we're going to be looking to staff, county staff, to come to us with some actionable policy recommendations. My hope is that we will also be running parallel processes, not here at the county in terms of policy, but county-wide, region-wide. So as our representative on SANDAG, I'm going to be bringing this to SANDAG. I'm going to be saying, what can we do as a jurisdiction at SANDAG? It's outside the scope of what we can actually implement here at the county, but what can we do through SANDAG as a region, policy levers that are not implementable or actionable at the county. I'm sure there will be many cities who don't have the capacity to commission a report by global and statewide experts, because the folks that we have working on this Green Jobs Plan, the folks that we had at UCSD working on this decarbonization plan, these are the best in the world. And we are really fortunate as a county to be able to hire the best in the world to do this analysis. But our partners at the cities, many of our mayors don't even have a staff person, much less a staff that can do work. So I think that we're going to be looking, I'm sure that our city partners will be looking at what comes out in August as a jumping off point for what can they be doing at their own cities. And I'm hopeful that my colleagues who sit on different authorities, on MTS, on the Air Quality Board, are also going to be taking all of this and coming to their boards and saying, hey, we did this at the county. What can we move through in our partnerships in our different jurisdictions? So I just thought it was important to take a moment, because this is great. I'm so excited. I think it's really interesting. I thought it was well written. I learned a lot. But in terms of a process to moving towards policies that we're going to be coming forward, it's important that we all are clear of what this process is going to look like, so that we can all be part of that conversation, and that when we get to August, where there's actually some analysis that looks at the job investments, that we have actually engaged in that conversation together. So all that being said, I do want to stop and say a big thank you to Dr. McCord and his team. I found this just very interesting. And I also know that, as I said, there's things missing in terms of unproven pathways, in terms of new technologies. I think that's right. I think that we can continue looking at some of these other technologies, and we should continue looking at some of these technologies. What I really appreciated about this report is it sort of bracketed the conversation. It said, okay, if we just do what we know is technically feasible, these are the things that we can do that's technically feasible. It doesn't take off the table that we need to continue looking at innovation and new technologies that will continue coming down the pipeline. But it says, okay, well, this is what we know today that we can do. And I think that's a very helpful grounding and starting point. So I just want to back up. Again, I appreciate this. I appreciate the work. I think it's incredible how many people cared to come, given that this is the first of 4 interim reports. So this obviously matters a lot. I just want to take a moment to talk about how I got engaged in working on climate. Like, why did I start caring about climate? Because I think that you got to go back to the human. Why are we doing this work? It's the human. And for me, this work really began when I was working on global development policy, and particularly on poverty in small island nations and sub-Saharan Africa. And realizing that the work I was doing on poverty and trying to create opportunities for people to have 3 meals a day, to be able to go to school, things that we in our county, honestly, we're doing pretty well compared to a lot of regions in the world. Realized that all of this was going to be off the table because there's droughts and large swaths of land that people used to farm and live on have become inhospitable. That there are now floods and rising sea levels where whole islands where people have lived for eons are disappearing under the water. And we have climate refugees who have been displaced from their homes with nothing. The story about that you told about Wales, I think, is indicative of what's happening worldwide. And this is not just a set of challenges or problems that people in the global south are facing. These are problems that we are increasingly facing right here in our own community. I represent Scripps Ranch. And as someone said earlier today, you cannot get home insurance in Scripps Ranch for fire because wildfires are too present of a danger. And this is increasingly happening here in our community. We have parts of my district are threatened by coastal flooding, and that with rising sea levels, this is an increasing threat to people's well-being and safety. And we can just listen to what our firefighters have said over the last year as they've been in our board meetings around the challenges they face protecting our communities from the threat of wildfires. We can just listen to what's happened across the state of California, the Rainbow Fire. We know that it is not just a question of some abstract idea around 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees or some degrees that they talk about in Copenhagen. It's about fires. It's about our safety. It's about floods. And it's happening now. And if we don't have a real plan, at the end of the day, it's going to be too late to have a plan. And so I think what I'm most excited about in this work that we're doing here in San Diego County is that it's extremely rare that you have leadership that is equally committed to labor, to being a good partner with labor, to being good partners with working families, committed to equity, committed to protecting the middle class, committed to creating opportunities for workers, and committed to taking action on climate and protecting our environment and our planet for future generations. It's a very rare moment to have that kind of leadership. I feel very honored to serve with colleagues who share those two values in equal measure. And I see worldwide, especially across the United States, a complete inability to take real action on these challenges because they're posed as competing, as opposed to each other, that you have to choose. Well, I will not choose, and I do not think my colleagues will choose. We will do both. And that's very, very rare to say that we will do both. And we will do the hard work to do both. And I think that as we move forward in this process with this commitment that these both values are equally important, we can be a model for the rest of California and the rest of the country about how good people with good intentions and commitments to do right by each other, to do right by working people, do right by equity, do right by future generations, to do right by our environment and public safety, can actually come together to do something that is very, very, very hard. Because as my colleague said, the right time to plant this tree was 45 years ago, but we didn't do it, and we have to figure out how to do it now, and we have to do it in a way that protects both of these values. So I'm excited about this report. I think it was very interesting. I'm excited to work together in this process as we move forward, and I'm honored to serve on a board with colleagues who are willing to do that hard work. So thank you.
Thank you.